a ballad or hymn rather than watch Frank Sinatra on television. Keeping time to my father's banal rhymes, it was, let's have some wine when things were fine, or more often, you always whine. And she predictably replied with her, I don't mind, and that's fine. It was the pact she kept, but didn't express, the ways she placed plain verbs like see and eat and sleep, far away from the dangers of dare and rage or age, that taught me the importance of listening to what was not said, what I couldn't understand, like the sermons in church by the priests speaking in Latin or ancient Greek. I came to admire for tone and somber murmurings, and especially the rapture of everything the words didn't capture. I'm going to read an older poem that actually, when I first came to Greece, my paternal grandparents were still alive, and they had lived through the German occupation, and it made it all very present suddenly to hear their stories, as though time had stopped. This son. We speak of the woman who fed her cats all day, her children lost in war. The talk moves back to what will not die, potatoes stolen right at picking time, the wait beneath German offices to catch tossed apple cores. Her hands are spotted now, age spots spattered with carrot, a pink thread caught in her falling hair, mending in laundered heaps. The stockings swim in sheer circles at her ankles. The 2 wedding bands are loose around her finger as she works, as she gathers chicken parts, salts the flesh. There are drying plastic sheets glued against the kitchen tile. Water gathers in their creases, tears in her lines, her face, at the fogged pain so much breath has stained. I actually had a job next to a cemetery, and it was one of the most boring jobs I've ever had. I was editing, and so I would watch these caskets going in and out of this basement across. So anyway, here's the product of that experience. Below the cemetery. This is the road of the dead. Shops sell laminated photographs, faces in garish colors sealed into marble headstones, as if permanence might be given to what is gone, the edifices meant to decorate absence. Winged angels, suppliant and patient, robed Christs, even the odd Cupid lined shelves of dust-filmed windows. They don't commemorate the devils like Giotto's frescoes, passive as the shopkeepers with their days-old beards, cigarettes, their shirt collars vaguely soiled. There is nothing here of ecstasy or battle, not even the devastation of loss, unless this is finally what it looks like. The men hardly aware of where they're standing in entranceways that display caskets, frigid Madonnas, plastic flowers, and tinny candelabra, a welcome to an underworld that is daylight thrown on what cannot be resurrected. And I'll finish with a final poem that I wrote when I found out that May 19th was the commemoration of the Pondian genocide. And I got very much interested in this history. And I was without a title for this, but I think I finally found it. I wanted a Pondian word. And so the working title is Yasir, which is the one who's it's basically a downtrodden person, but I prefer the definition of the one whose belongings are all he carries, which could suggest his history as well. And I'm going to read this for Jordan. There are names, Aibasti, Niksar, Iondon, once villages where chamomile and blood poppies grow, where the stones, quiet as those who may know, belong to whole towns now erased by the grass. Then a boy, the Turk in his 80s, remembers helping his neighbors spread manure, talks of how it nurtured the crops. The families were blacksmiths, weavers, farmers who gathered in the village square, this time not in preparation for the August festival, or to dance the kotsari to the kemenç. This time, the Turks who tolled the church bells ordered those gathered to walk, not to stop walking. Away from what they knew of home, they carried newborns, the not yet born, small cloth pockets of grain, sometimes gold coins as the freshly churned fields, familiar skies became death fields and skies. I was grateful for the cowhide moccasins grandfather had made for me, Themia thinks. She is 10, one of hundreds, then one of the thousands that became the hundreds of thousands ordered by Kemalist soldiers to keep walking. The pots and pans were buried on the land, a favorite calf left tethered to an apple tree, the fireplace where grandfather told tales and played the viol, like the ravines and pear trees, the color of bread, people scattering seed for another harvest, lost as the walk grew long, as each day soldiers on horseback were replaced with other soldiers, as the trees grew smaller, the rocks taller, as sand blew into parched mouths, feet burned on the baking earth, and the world emptied its hills and scents, and the soldiers continued to whip those who could still walk, clutching dead babies the soldiers would not allow buried, forcing the dead to be left on roadsides, lying on stone walls, though sometimes someone dug a quick grave with his hands as they continued to walk into the sky's infinity, murmuring a language almost gone. Thank you.
It's good to be back in Athens. Actually, I moved away from Athens 2.5 years ago to live in Thessaloniki. And when I started thinking about moving, I suddenly realized that I'd lived in Athens more years than any city in my life. 24 years I lived in Athens. So when I was invited here tonight to come back to Athens and read, for the first time to read in Athens since I left, I thought I'd read poems I've written set in Athens. The first one goes back to when I first came to Greece in 1976, a poem I wrote almost 30 years ago. At the end of that trip, it's sort of set in a hotel in Ammonia Square, thinking back on the trip and sort of departing from the person I was with at that time. Scaffolding, Athens, 1975. Across the alley, an iron ball dangles over rubble. Trucks pass. Windows shake. Deb sleeps on the iron bed. On Syros, her anger, my drinking, my tearing at her skirt, a desire to hurt her, and somewhere in memory, a sailor's powerful hands and whiskey breath. I'm 12, I'm frightened, I'm slamming my fist into the sand. The women held scarves in their hands as they danced for their clamorous husbands. One step back, and the circle enlarged. A turn of the shoulder, a glance back, then one long step forward past the Retsina and Feta, the chapel on the cliff, to the Aegean, a clarity we'd never forget. We loved the crumbling naiads, scaffolding holding chin and arms. We sat on the fluted columns, dreaming of falling into a corner no one remembered. An old man with a propped camera told us to sit where the scaffolding didn't show. His coat white as the columns, his head fragile as vases. He could have shattered in front of us. I can see him now. He's smiling. He's handing us our picture. We're naiads. He's a Caryatide. What happened can't hold us. As she wakes, I see her scarf, her dancing, the Scot smashing the window. Now I'm wrapping his hand, Deb crying, the fisherman laughing, the iron ball in its languorous arc of destruction. I hand her clothes, and she slowly dresses. The sound of nylons, buckles, breaking glass, and now her shoes, the black ones, the pumps. This poem comes from a time when I lived in the northern suburbs of Athens. Then the Pagliadzides passed. Now they don't do that much anymore in the suburbs, but anyway. Spring cleaning. Collecting the unwanted, worn out, and broken, this first warm day of a late spring. Yard cluttered with almond blossoms. I hear a loudspeaker blaring up and down the streets. Pagliadzis, Pagliadzis, his three-wheeled truck loaded with torn couches, legless chairs, cracked urns and lamps, stacks of clothes and plastic bags piled high and swaying. My body should be there too, hauled to a shop on an upcrop of stone behind a row of Piraeus apartments. Some narrow yard or basement with rusting wash machines, stacked motors, hollowed casings of water heaters standing guard over the dusty shelves. And if he hauled me off, who'd notice my absence? Who'd step into the warm hollow, hear the hiss of me dissipating, even the memory of me gone? The energy that was me swirling in some larger pulse, some greater breathing, cured of want at last. Bodies set in a place beyond desire. Pagliadzis, Pagliadzis, spewing out exhaust as he trembles by. The next poem I wrote after a colleague of mine's wife had died. I used to teach at University of Laverne, like Adrian here and several other people in the audience. And it's a poem sort of recounting that moment, but it's seen from the point of view of the workers in the cemetery. It's a poem I've been working on for about 10 years now, and maybe I've got it right, but who knows? We'll see. Cemetery workers, Zographou, Athens. At the appointed hour, 3 workers put out their cigarettes and hoist the wreaths, lead all the mourners up the gravel path to a fresh pile of earth. When the priest begins, they step aside, again light cigarettes. One eyes the clutter of gray high-rises up Imitos, and higher, where the mountain's craggy peak snags a cloud of smoke and fumes, keeps it hovering right here. The second watches a stooped woman a few rows down, pouring soapy water over a marble headstone, scrubbing the letters and numbers, wiping the portrait clean, this one a girl of 12. She opens the glass casement, lights the candle, picks out the fallen petals from a tin box with heart-shaped beads, a doll whose stiff blonde curls she now strokes as she leans the body upright so the eyes open. The third looks over at the job in progress, a husband kissing his wife's doughy cheek one last time, calling out her name, though she is past response. He unties the ribbon at her wrists, throws in a fistful of dirt, thick clumps on her lace bosom, several grains in the groove of her lips, closes the lid. 2 workers step up now, slip a frayed rope under each end, straddle the open pit, and lower the coffin head first. As the third takes up his shovel, the mourners turn away. They won't see the workers flinging dirt, won't hear dirt clods hitting wood. When they reach the cafenil by the flower shop where the cabbies wait, where the husband must be served by the cemetery waiter, dressed as any other in black pants, white shirt, the sound of earth hitting earth will be soft, almost gentle, like the waiter's voice as he talks to the silent husband of coming elections, the rising price of real estate, what to do about that damn cloud that won't leave this part of the city. Thank you.